really happy to share what a day in my life looks like. But I thought what might be more interesting for all of you, especially because I'm a couple decades in my career, is sharing what my career path looked like. And then also talk a little bit about, from my perspective, as someone who has hired lots of people, what might be important in thinking about for your interviews from a soft skills perspective. All right, let me start my slides here. Are you all able to see this okay? Thumbs up. Perfect. So the quick overview on me, I started my career really with the intention of going into finance. I've now ended 22 years later, starting my own advisory firm where I'm working with early stage startups and founders. I got to meet Faison and Yassine through some of the work that I'm doing now. But my path to get to where I am now is actually not at all where I expected I would be. And moreover, it was very, very curvy because what I've optimized for in my life is having lots of big, juicy life experiences. I went to Cal. I wonder how many of you actually went to Cal. I find that when I'm in New York, I don't see as many Cal alums. Everybody seems to go to Rutgers or some sort of East Coast school. When I was at Cal, I actually undergrad studied legal studies. I had the intention of going into big finance. And with that, one of the first pieces of work that I sought out was actually an internship at a company called Ask. Ask.com is still around. I actually checked today, though I don't use them anymore. And just to date myself, Ask was a very natural language search engine that launched as Google was in beta. So I had the earliest of tech experiences that you possibly could. While I was at Ask, I thought, I was building my experiences, building my resume, really for me to be able to get a finance job after I graduated. And I did go interview with Deloitte. I went into audit. And at the same time, I also interviewed with Capgemini, one of the big consulting firms that was working with Ask at the time in doing systems work. I ended up interviewing with them too. And when people ask me how I made the decision to go down the finance path versus the systems consulting path, the really honest answer was systems at that time, that job offer paid a lot more, like a lot more. And that's really how I made my decision. I was optimizing for the experience. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I thought both paths really could have opened up opportunities for me, and the money was kind of the breaking point for me. From there, as you can see, I've had actually 4 different careers. I spent time in systems consulting, IT program management, and at LinkedIn, I pivoted. I moved into roles that were adjacent to what I was doing previously, from sales IT into revenue operations into sales leadership, where I've spent the last 7 or 8 years. I did the same sort of role at Cameo, a Series C startup too, where I was up until last summer when I decided to take a career break and really reset and rethink how I wanted to spend this next half of my career. A day in the life for me now looks quite different from where I began in my career, right? As I've gotten older and more experienced in my career, I've gone from having a lot of execution types of roles to ones where I'm providing much more leadership and directing other people's work and thinking a lot more around strategy, operations, cross-functional leadership. By the way, I can see the chat, so if there are questions, feel free to drop questions in there, and I'm happy to answer them. As I think about how I have found fulfillment in my work, right, there are 3 keys that I want to share with all of you. I think the first is recognize that you are at such an incredible time in your life. You're just beginning what will be a very long, illustrious, and hopefully really fulfilling career. I think one of the things I think about at the very start of my career was that I felt like every single micro decision that I made would be so consequential for the various steps that would be would follow. And the reality is, some of that was kind of true, right? If I hadn't made that decision based on the money to go be a consultant, I may not have had these other steps that followed. But recognize that your career is long. I shared that I'm on my 4th career now, and what I've really optimized for is the journey rather than the destination. Optimize for those experiences. At the beginning of your career, I think my advice would be to optimize for skills, but think about experiences as being the long game, really. The second thing that I would share is that I'm a big believer in collecting dots to connect dots. And what I mean by that is thinking about networking. Investing in yourself while you're investing in others is one of the best things that you can do. Most of the job opportunities and experiences that I've had have come from folks that I have met along the way. I love that the HeadStarter team is hosting these events a lot for the purpose of connecting dots, right? And as you're attending these sorts of events, you're also getting to collect tons of dots that you can bring outside of these events to your network as well. The last thing that I will share is about knowing your why. And I'll talk about this a little bit on the next slide as well. I think having real clarity around why you are doing what you're doing, why you are pursuing the path you're pursuing, why you're pursuing the job you're pursuing. It's incredibly important, not just for your own personal fulfillment, right? To make sure that your work actually aligns with your values. But I think one thing I've really observed is that people like to help, and being able to share why you're doing what you're doing, it recruits people around you to be able to help. In the context of a software engineering career, can you give an example of choosing an experience versus skill? Let me think about that. I think the sorts of projects that you might try to align yourself with, I would think about that as being an experience. Yes, it may be to further a particular skill that you want, but when I think about experience, I'm thinking about the overall package that it comes with. Who might you be working with? What type of problem might you be solving? What sort of connections might you be creating? Optimize for those. All right, so I'm gonna wrap it up by sharing 3 keys for interviews. There are lots of things to think about. These are the ones that I prioritize for myself. So the first is, it's a basic one, table stakes, particularly from a technical perspective. Know your shit. I don't think I need to share that with you, right? The second is knowing your why. I just talked about really being clear around your intention, why you're going for a particular role, why a particular company is the right place for you, and practice that. You know, one of the big value propositions with HeadStarter, which I love so much, is that it's a platform where you get to practice not only technical, but also really soft skill development too. That was a plug for HeadStarter, just in case any of you were confused about that. And then the last thing I'll share is around demonstrating curiosity, right? In my career of interviewing, this has been one of my most favorite things that I probe for when I'm interviewing people. I think that being able to articulate what you do, why you did it, what you learned from it, and how you're thinking about your next step is one of the best ways really to demonstrate curiosity. Post-pandemic, one of my favorite questions that I would ask in interviews was about, tell me something that you thought a lot about during the pandemic. Share an epiphany that you might have had during the pandemic. I'm interested to hear in the chat what all of you have thought about. But that's a really good one that has given me indication on how introspective might this person be, right? How broadly do they think about various things? How curious are they? And it's always a pretty good indicator of how they might translate that into the work that they do.